Well, good morning, everybody. My name is David McLeod. Welcome to the fourth episode of Life Matters TV with myself, David McLeod, and my good friend Tommy Stoffel, the Chatter Relaxer. I am here in the Bay Area, up in Belmont, not far from San Francisco, and Tommy is way down in the Los Angeles areas, in Thousand Oaks, isn't it, Tommy?
It sure is, way down here, yep.
Yep. And today we're going to be talking about approvalitis, and I know that this is something that Tommy is so excited about, he just can't sit still. So I'm going to pass it over to Tommy.
Thanks, David. Thanks, David. So, as David said, today's topic is about approval, and so much so that it can hook us and have impact on our life that I gave it this little name of approvalitis, almost like a disease. And it is. It's almost like a disease that we have. And we're going to talk about today where this illness comes from and what we can do to get rid of it, if you so choose. And I'm just going to kick off this topic right up front with an advanced technique. So right up front, you're going to get an advanced technique on how to deal with approvalitis. And here it is. I really don't care what you think about me. It's like that, right? Now that may sound a little harsh at first. But really, how much of ourselves do we give to other people? How much do we desire and need their opinions and their approval? I'm going to show you a little diagram here. I'm going to hold it up in front of my face so hopefully you can see it. And it's a guy sitting in front of a wall of certificates.
Oh, yeah.
How many of us have these certificates in our heads, right? From our parents, from our teachers, from our boss. And we tailor our behavior almost like we're boxed in, just desiring and needing the approval of others. So we're going to delve deep into this topic today and look at ways it impacts our life and ways we want to maybe free ourselves from some of it. So, David, what do you have to intro on the topic now that I've warmed it up?
I was just noticing how hurt I was that you don't care what I think about you.
But I don't. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I know. And actually, it's a really good point. I've heard it said that what other people think of me is none of my business. And I mean, I think that's a great quote. It says it so beautifully, you know. If I'm always concerned about what other people are thinking of me, then I'm not really thinking about what I think of me. I'm more concerned about, putting it out there. And that is really disempowering to me. I basically lose sense of who I really am. I lose sense of what's important to me, and I forget what my real purpose is and who I am in this world.
Yeah, and it's insidious too. I mean, we don't realize that it's happening every day. We don't realize that we're giving away our power to other people. And I'm going to just take you on a swim in the deep end of the pool for a minute, because what I said was, I don't care what you think about me. And the word in there, the operative word, is think.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about that word for a minute, most of us are running around with a bunch of noise in our head, a bunch of chatter, a bunch of, thinking this, thinking that. And you know what? Until you have control of your mind, you don't.
Yeah.
So consider that when you're considering the opinions and the ideas of other people, because everyone's coming from their own place, and whether it's a great place or a kind of a messed up place, we just need to consider the source of who we're valuing, opinions from as well.
Yeah, that's really true. I think we put way too much stock in our minds and not enough stock in our hearts, and I think that's a big part of the problem, or the reason that we have so much challenge and so much difficulty in the world. And I just wanted to say I really like that image that you put up, the picture of the guy looking at the wall with all the certificates. And I know that I've done some of that in my life. I've measured my own value according to accomplishments rather than just recognizing who I really am. And the irony here is, when I see other people doing that, when I see other people measuring themselves against their accomplishments, it's easy for me to tell them, hey, wait a minute, you're not your accomplishments. You are much, much bigger than your accomplishments. And yet I forget to tell that to myself.
Yeah, that's true too. There is an element to this too, right? We're not abandoning our own accomplishments. We're not abandoning our own measurements. We do want to be a little bit better each day. We want, we have some goals to attain.
Mm-hmm.
We get caught up though in a lot of competition and comparison, right? We're comparing ourselves to the proverbial Joneses, and we're comparing ourselves to this and comparing ourselves to that. And that, then again, it gives us this whole sense, this whole comparison game, this sense of depending on other people's approval to feel good about ourselves. What does that lead to? It leads us into these mindsets of they're not good enoughs.
Exactly. Yeah, and comparison really is a precursor to competition. In fact, maybe they're one and the same thing. I mean, if I'm competing, I'm constantly comparing myself to some standard that I have in my mind, and so I'm competing with that standard all the time. But the other thing that I've noticed that happens, or has happened anyway in my life, is that the moment I believe I've reached one standard, then I jump it up to the next level and I say, oh, got to go to the next standard. It's still not good enough, and it will never be good enough. And I think, as you mentioned about valuing the accomplishments, one of the ways that I metaphorize that statement is, it's like we've got a big mountain in front of us. It's a huge, tall mountain, and that's all we see is a big, giant, enormous mountain. And even when we take 10 steps, it's still a huge amount of mountain left. Even if we take 20 steps, it's still a huge amount of mountain left. And what I think is really important is every once in a while, as you're climbing the mountain, stop, take a look back, and notice how far up you've come. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Honoring the accomplishment, but not necessarily trying to be the accomplishment.
Yeah, nice, very nicely said. And I love the analogy, the metaphor, the visual there of stopping and observing where you are, where you've gotten to. I hear so many people that are they want to attain some higher level of something, whether it's spiritual or consciousness or some freedom, and they're constantly making great strides and making steps, whether they're little steps or one hand after another up the mountain. But then they beat themselves up because they're not at the top yet.
Exactly.
It's like, come on, set your own pace. This is your life. This is your journey. This is your path, and nobody else should be setting those measurements for you.
Yeah.
Back to that wall of certificates, right? This wall of certificates. It's one of my teachers. I'll bring that up again since you like it so much. That wall of certificates is one of my teachers said it's like a house of cards as well.
Oh yeah.
We have all these certificates of approval, and sometimes our sense of self can be built on the ideas and opinions of other people. And you know what a house of cards looks like, and you know how fragile it is. And it doesn't take much for one person just to kind of snap and say, you know what, I don't like you anymore because of blah, blah, blah. And they pull one card out, and what happens? Your whole sense of self goes crashing to the floor.
Yeah.
It's just no way to live. Not necessary.
That's a really good point. I was thinking about that as you were speaking, and maybe this is exactly what you're saying, but I was hearing it in a different way. I've noticed this in my life, that I can have hundreds of certificates of approval, but give me one certificate of disapproval, and that's the one that destroys me. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. It's almost the same as well, I guess it is the same. It's like pulling out one card and watching the whole thing fall apart. Right.
And depending on who that is that says it, right? Depending on how much of an attachment we have to that person's opinion.
Yeah.
If we get a bad comment on this video, it's like, okay, but if one of the people we've grown up to admire and respect comes in and says, you guys are screwing this all, and boom, what's it going to do?
Well, it won't happen to us because we're so enlightened. I mean, obviously.
Dude, now you just doomed us.
There's probably about 20 people out there watching right now, and they're all going to give nasty comments.
We're stepping on our own house of cards today. There is no house of cards anymore. They're all messed up on the floor. So
I noticed here, Tommy, I just wanted to point out, Jules made a comment here. He says, and yet those certificates help remind us that we have made progress, those little steps up that mountain. So yeah, thank you, Jules, for commenting on that. And that's a great reminder. Yeah,
and I'll say it again. So to Jules' point, perfect. yeah, our own certificates of our own approval, that we're doing well, that we're, making progress, that we're, comparing ourselves against our own criteria. That's all about our being on our path and doing our work.
Mm-hmm.
It's this unconscious, unknowing sense of depending on other people's approvals. Now, maybe you have a teacher that you want to aspire, and show that you're learning things from. Good. But think about all the stuff that we've built up since childhood, right? This starts really early.
Mm-hmm.
This starts from when we're learning how to pee, right?
That's right.
Right? You're trying to get potty trained, yeah. And you get the good boy, bad boy. You get the, oh yeah, good job, Tommy. Oh no, not in your diaper again, right? So
yeah.
So the roots are deep.
That's right.
And that's why it's kind of planted in us, and it's a seed that's planted there. And it's a matter of deciding whether you want the weed part of what's growing to continue.
Absolutely.
Or you want to go dig the root of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because very often we don't even recognize the triggers that we have in ourselves that have been planted in us from such a young age. And we're still behaving in some ways as if we're 1 or 2 or 3 years old, and we're showing up that way, and we're letting our whininess, it might not come out as whininess, but it sure comes out one way or another, and it impacts the way we show up in the world. And so we tend maybe not to trust people, or we tend to be afraid of expressing who we really are, because we've learned different lessons when we were young. And if I didn't pee right, then maybe that means I don't do the dishes right, or maybe it means that I don't make the toast right, or maybe it means that I don't drive quite right. You see, we can take that tiny little message and blow it up into such a huge thing that it basically overrides our entire life.
Yeah, which leads right into kind of what we talked about last week, or 2 weeks ago, about fear. Mm-hmm. Or having confidence, kind of the dampers of fear. And so I'll tell you a story. When I was going to school, I went to Catholic grade school, and it came time, do you want to be an altar boy? And for some reason, I just said no. I didn't know why I said no, but I said no to that. So instead of that, I had to go read. I had to go read. One of the greatest fears of people is to stand in public and speak. And at 11, 12 years old, I had to go stand in front of my class in this whole church and read from the book. Well, I mumbled my head off. I was like, blah, 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 and it was horrible, but I got through that. But it still caught up, like I was concerned about what people were thinking of me. Mm-hmm. Who's going to make fun of me? What, am I going to be laughed at for this? And that, those things hang on for a while.
Yeah.
That one, right? We're standing here talking to people, so we're getting over that little by little.
Exactly.
But it plants seeds of fear in us as well, and stops us from doing things.
Well, yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, the moment you get up on stage and you want to speak in front of people, what are you doing? You're putting yourself at risk of being disapproved. You're putting yourself in that place of being judged, and the judgments may not be what you want to hear. And so it shuts you down. It tends to squash you and keep you small. And I think ultimately, one of the things that I have learned in my life, and maybe you've experienced this too, is yes, people are judging us. They're judging us all the time, and we are judging people. That's what we do. We judge. It's not that we're necessarily judging people in a bad way either. We're just observing and saying, oh, I noticed that this person does that, this person does that. Most of the times our judgments are pretty benign. They're pretty gentle. And yet people are afraid of the really, really heavy negative judgments most of the time. It's imbalanced. I don't quite understand that. But that's what I've noticed for me. Most people don't judge me harshly, even though I imagine that they are doing that.
Right. We imagine worst case, right, in our own head. Yep. What are they thinking about me? What are they thinking about me? And when we go to these worst case scenarios, and most of the time that's not true. Most people, like you said, it's none of my business what you think of me.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that too, right? Most people don't even give you a second thought. Mm-hmm. we get so caught
That's
up in
right.
ourselves.
You're not that
And we think we're
important.
so right.
You're not that important. I'm not. They're not really paying attention to you.
No, no, they're paying attention to themselves. They don't,
That's right. Exactly. They're
you're,
busy. They're busy thinking, oh my God, what's he thinking of me? What a silly game we play with each other.
Dude, yeah, I think the Buddhists call it self-cherishing. That, we self-cherish ourselves so much we think, oh, we're so important. I actually have I came across a quote a couple days ago which is exactly aligned with this, and it says, we're self-cherishing, right? Well, I'm so important. We're so dependent on the opinions and approval of others that we lose our freedom to respond and act in the most constructive way. We lose our freedom.
Can you say that again?
To respond.
Yeah, say it again. That's pretty cool.
So we become dependent on when we become dependent on the approval and opinions of others, because we're so so concerned with our image, that we lose our freedom to respond and act in the most constructive way. So we're kind of clouded in our vision, and it prevents us from just really being in the moment. It prevents us from responding to situations. It prevents us from being constructive and open and genuine in what comes through us.
Yeah.
Right? It's like another wall that's up there, another brick in the wall.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, I like that comment about we lose our freedom. I think, in fact, what a slight variation on the phrasing might be, when I'm spending all this time busy worrying about what other people are thinking of me and stuff, I give up my freedom to respond. I am giving my power away. I am disempowering myself by doing that.
Yeah, and be gentle with ourselves, because until we know what we're doing, we don't know what we're doing. So if we've been behaving this way up until this point, now you have approvalitis. So now you have some options when you feel yourself getting in those situations. Think about if you want to be giving your power away in those moments.
Yeah. No, and that's a really good piece of advice there too, Tommy, about, I think you're right. We do have to be gentle with ourselves. And to me, what that means is I have to love myself without worrying so much about how other people are thinking of me. It's just being willing to say I'm okay just as I am, regardless of what anybody says about me.
Yeah. Yeah. But back to Jules' point, and yes, Jules, enlightenment is great, not only good. And back to Jules' point, well, I lost the point, but it was about ourselves, right? That we need to honor ourselves in a way that we know we're making progress and we know we're doing the right thing. All good. Yep. So it's just watching and seeing how much we're caught in this box of needing other people's approval. Right. That's the thing. That's the thing we're talking about today, and I'm digging into it.
Right. The whole thing is really about recognizing that we are perfect just as we are. We don't need to do anything more. And as you say, we're making progress, and we have to acknowledge that progress and honor that progress. But here's something else that my son is really good at doing this, with me. He always challenges me on this stuff, and he says, "Dad, maybe no progress is exactly the right progress for you right now." And I'm thinking, wow, man, that is deep. But he's right. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point. When we're climbing up the mountain and we stop, maybe stopping is exactly what we need in the moment. And maybe even backtracking a little bit is important. Who knows? We may have dropped a treasure back there or missed a treasure, and so stepping back and taking another look might be an opportunity to make even more progress that we hadn't anticipated. So it's not just about acknowledging the progress we've made, but recognizing that whatever we're doing right now is progress in its own way.
You're absolutely right, man. And you just brought up something that I just actually practiced a few months ago. I was running in a certain direction, and I just had to take a pause and stop. And I just looked at what I was doing and why I was doing it. And in that pause, one of the things I focused on myself was, I don't care what you think about me. I really had to go inside and look at that again, because I was finding myself driving down the road thinking, oh, who's looking at me? Oh, what are they saying about me? Oh, you know, and it's so insidious and it's so deeply implanted that sometimes stopping and going back and looking at something we think we've already taken care of, there's still roots. There's still roots of the weed down there in the garden, in the dirt.
Well, so one of the things that we told people when we sent out our emails and stuff is that we're on a journey to search for a cure for this thing. So what do you propose, what do you suggest are the next steps for anybody who may find him or herself caught up in this whole dynamic of approvalitis?
All right, well, if so you already have that advanced technique, right? That harsh one, I don't care what you think about me.
Yeah.
But that can actually be a bit of a mantra. If you feel like that's something that will help you kind of detach some of those hooks that you have of approval from people, or approval from groups. You know, maybe it's your workmates, maybe it's a certain group of people, maybe it's whoever. But so, and obviously you're not going to walk around saying that to people, so don't do that and come back with a black eye next week. That's not the point. The idea is kind of unlook it from your side. Yeah. But here's another kind of another approach and an exercise that I teach my students, and it's as simple as this: write a list of all the people that can make you sad. Write a list of names, and if you're afraid of somebody finding it, write it in code. But write a list of all the people who can make you sad.
So all the people that I believe can make me sad.
Yeah, who can push your buttons? Who can say something to you and change your mood? Who has the ability to send you an email and wreck your day? And flip this too, and you're also going to write the names of people, and they're probably going to be the same, who can make you happy, who can make you feel better, who can make you, you know, anybody who has that power to change your mood, to change how you're feeling. And it doesn't mean you're going to abandon all those feelings.
Yeah.
Make a list, just write it down. I always say, people say, oh, I'll do it in my head. Don't do it in your head. Write it down, take a good old-fashioned pen, pencil, and paper, or do it in your notes section in your computer or in your device, and write it down. Because what you'll do, a couple things, in this writing technique, you're going to hear this again and again from David and I, the writing technique is so powerful because it takes these ideas and concepts out of our heads and puts them in a place where we can observe them. So it's almost like we're taking ourselves out of ourselves and sitting out in the audience, and now our self is playing up on the stage, and we're sitting there in the audience and we're watching what's going on. So becoming the observer is what this writing is about. Yeah. And I'm sure you've heard of this. Become the observer, become the witness. So writing these things is really important. So yeah, write a list of the people, and you're not going to do anything with that list. You're not going to go fight with those people. You're not going to say, hey, stop, making me happy and sad. That's not the point. But just you making that list and looking at that list is going to bring a certain level of new awareness to these situations where you're dependent,
right?
You're attached to other people's opinions and approval.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, here's what I'm thinking right now as I write my own list. For each of those people on my list, I can easily just say in my head or quietly to myself, to each one of those people, I love you and I really don't care what you think about me. I love you and I really don't care what you think about me. And yeah, and that way I'm no longer giving my power away to those people. I'm not giving them the control knobs for my sadness or my happiness. I get to decide how happy or how sad I want to be, and in my own time.
Yeah, really powerful. It really works. And thanks for reading it back that way. That was very clear read back on what it does and why it's important. One last thing. This leads to another topic that we'll talk about another day, and I kind of played around with it a little bit when we talk about hooks, right? We have buttons, right? People push our buttons. Well, these hooks that people can yank on, these buttons that people can push, a lot of them are tied to this need for their approval and their opinions.
Oh yeah.
So that'll be another topic for another day, but just to kind of bring that back around circle.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And okay, so now that we've got the list, is there like an additional piece of exercise that people can do once I've got the list? Now, I suggested one possibility of just going through each name and just, you know, saying, I love you and I don't really care what you think about me. I think there's another little piece here that's really important, and this is to look in the mirror, right in the mirror, and say, I love you and I don't care what you think about me. Because that's the one right there in the mirror who's doing most of the judging. That's the one in the mirror who has the greatest demand for being perfect, being right, being better, being more, being, and so on and so on and so on. So I think that's the one we need to talk to the most. Invite yourself to look in the mirror, say, I love you and I don't care what you think of me.
Yep, and Jules, sometimes good enough is good enough. Right on. And
well, I think that's actually a really important point, because good enough is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's what we collectively, what I believe that it would serve us all to recognize that we are already perfect. There is no way we could become more perfect or less perfect, because we're already perfect just as we are. And we are perfect even in our desire to change or make ourselves more perfect. So if we can accept ourselves that way and have this exercise of I love you and I don't care what you think of me, that'll help to release some of those hooks, as you call them.
Yeah, it sure will, and it does.
Yeah.
So, I don't think there's anything else on this one. I think I've kind of exhausted the topic for today, David. You want to
yeah, I think
maybe
so.
talk about what's coming up?
Right. Well, you know, I'm really excited, Tommy, because next week I've invited my good friend Bob Doyle to come join us. Now, for those who don't know, Bob Doyle is one of the people who was involved in the making of that movie, The Secret. And Bob Doyle has been involved in law of attraction teaching for quite a few years now, and Bob and I became friends at a couple of conferences that we attended together, and I invited him to come and be a guest, and he said, yeah, I'd love to. So he's going to be joining us next week. We're going to be talking about the law of attraction. We're going to be talking about his notion of wealth beyond reason, and we're just going to have, like we had a really great time with Audra last week, we're going to have a great time with Bob next week. So I really encourage people to come and join us and share in that.
Well, I'm looking forward to that myself. So looking forward to hearing what Bob has to say.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks, Tommy, and have a great day. And remember, everybody, I don't care what you think of me. Say that to yourself a few times each day during the coming week. Okay, bye-bye for now.
Bye, everybody.